All right, Colts Nation, we are back and potentially better than ever. For you guys who have been here before, you know you're looking at something very, very different than what you're used to. I've obviously been gone for a little while, 3 weeks, I think even going on a month right now, but I was in the middle of kind of a big move, and I figured during a very slow period for the Indianapolis Colts, I just figured it would be a good time to take a step back, think about how to change the studio to look a little something like this, and then, of course, actually get the move settled. I mean, not for anything. Moving is not all that fun. And not for anything, I've let this type of comment go in the past, but I'm going to take this moment to be petty because it's a good excuse to talk about it. A lot of you guys thought that I used to record this thing from like a bedroom at my mom's house or something like that. And I understand that it likely wasn't some sort of bad faith. Like, I understand you guys were just kind of messing around a little bit. But at the same time, I was out here paying shitloads of rent. I mean, have you checked the prices of rent in New York? Okay, they're a heck of a lot more than the prices in Indiana. Okay, so I was paying all that money only for you guys to sit there and be like, oh, this kid's in a bedroom at his mom's house. Not for anything. It ain't easy out here in New York. Okay, I'd like a little bit of credit for it. But either way, what you were looking was my bedroom at a place with my roommate. So that was the only place I had. And the new place I have right now, I'm with me, myself, and nobody else. And I really just have this space over here dedicated specifically to the studio. Some of you might have seen the post that I put out there, but neither here nor there. That's all it is. How do we feel about what's going on in the back over here, huh? Because not for anything, I happen to love the way that this looks right now. And if you watch the old show, well, it's the same show, but if you had watched in the old studio, the bedroom studio, you'll recognize a lot of the things that are behind me. Really, what I wanted to do with this was kind of still keep a lot of the same elements back there because I thought I had some good stuff, but wanted to just upgrade the way things looked a little bit. And that's what we did. So we kind of kept the same essence of what was going on, but, add a little bit of spice, like, what's his name? Emerald. Bam! That type of thing. Okay. So either way, enough talk about me. We have to talk about the team, okay? Because it's been so long. So what we're going to talk about today are really a few things. One, free agent quarterback options today, Justin, right? Free agent options for the Colts. Jeremy Fowler reported a few that I believe he's implying that he knows that the Colts are interested in. Of course, we don't know whether or not that's true, but we'll take it at face value. We'll take Jeremy Fowler at his word. He said the Colts right now in free agency are looking at guys like Jacoby Brissett, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones. We're going to talk about my opinions on all of those options for the Indianapolis Colts and where I stand there. Additionally, 1075 The Fan was over there at the Combine, got to interview Shane Steichen. They talked about a lot of things, but Shane Steichen said something specifically that I thought was really interesting, something that I agree with, and something that I think we should look at when we talk about the team, the quote-unquote culture, all of that type of stuff. Really insightful stuff from Shane Steichen. We're going to get to that. And then, of course, if you're talking about the draft, if you're talking about the Combine, if you're talking about the number 14 overall pick, if you're talking about the Indianapolis Colts, which we are, it's really hard not to talk about Tyler Warren, the tight end out of, Penn State, if I'm not mistaken. Got to talk about him. And is it just a shoo-in that the Colts are going there? I mean, if you look at mock drafts right now, just about every single one of them has Tyler Warren going to the team. So we're going to talk about everything I just listed and perhaps a little bit more. You don't know what the heck is going to be happening on the show when we're live to recording. You never know what it's going to be. But before we do all that, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help us get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're on our quest to 4,000 subscribers over here on the YouTube channel. We'd like to be there by the start of next season. So if you keep coming back, you enjoy the content, perhaps today's the day. If you have not done it yet, audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you enjoy the show and perhaps leave some kind words as well. The 5 stars is one thing, but if you sit there and say, hey, Justin is looking great. He's looking fantastic. His new studio looks fantastic, even though I'm listening on the audio version and have no clue what it looks like. He sounds so youthful and full of life and energetic, which is why I thought he lived at his parents' house. But as it turns out, he's responsible for rent in New York. You leave any of those things in your 5-star review, we would not mind. But most importantly, let's enjoy the show. Let's enjoy the content. Let's be civil in the comment section. You have no clue what the person on the other end of the keyboard is going through today. Of course, we're allowed to disagree, but we want civil disagreement. We're trying to push the discussion further, right? We're not trying to degrade it into name calling and this, that, and the next. Like, we don't want it to be toxic and volatile in here, okay? We want thoughtful discussion about the Indianapolis Colts. But with all those disclaimers out of the way, with me asking you to do things for me, we're going to go back to the content. It's time for me to start giving back to you, right? So we're going to start with those free agent quarterbacks. And again, the names listed, and this is also in the order of how much I'm excited about the prospect of them coming in. These were the quarterbacks listed by Jeremy Fowler, okay? Jacoby Brissett, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Daniel Jones. Yes, Daniel Jones is the one I'm most excited about, but we're going to start on the low end and move up. Now, Jacoby Brissett, obviously a familiar name for Colts fans, right? For me, here's how I view the Jacoby Brissett situation, okay? I've actually advocated for them to bring in Jacoby Brissett as a backup. Not for anything. I'm one of these people that thought when Jacoby Brissett was filling in for Andrew Luck before ultimately Andrew Luck retired and we brought in Phillip Rivers, in my personal opinion, I thought Jacoby Brissett had earned the right to get another year as the starter. If you remember, the year before Phillip Rivers, they were around 5-2. Don't quote me on the record, but I think that's what it was. They were 5-2. He hurt his knee, did not come back the same, and ultimately the season sort of fell apart. At that point, we brought in Phillip Rivers, which turned out to be one of the better seasons, if not the best season we've had under Chris Ballard. All good and well, but point being, ever since that time, I kind of wanted Jacoby Brissett back in the blue and white, right? That was just me personally. That being said, at this juncture, when we talk about what it is that the Colts are looking for at quarterback, which is simply someone who can actually come in and push for the starting job, right? Because make no mistake, when you evaluate right now the options that the Colts have at quarterback this offseason, to do it the right way, you have to kind of objectively look at the situation that's in front of us, okay? Because we're not going to get someone this offseason. There's just no options available that except Tanner McKee from the Philadelphia Eagles, of course. By the way, if you see that idea anywhere, make no mistake, that's where I got it. Don't let someone else, or that's where they got it. I'm where they got it, right? That makes sense. Speak English, Justin. Don't let anyone else tell you that that was their idea. That's my idea and one of the great ideas I've ever given. But neither here nor there, my point is that to really have a fine discussion about the quarterback situation for the Colts, you do have to objectively look and say, okay, there's no one that we're going to be able to get this offseason that actually makes you feel confident that that's definitely the franchise guy. Like, there is no fix to the Colts quarterback situation this offseason happening. When you look at it through that lens, you can start to look at some of the guys that Jeremy Fowler said and say, okay, I can get behind these options, but Jacoby Brissett, kind of just a boring one at this point. Like, as much as I like Jacoby Brissett, as much as I think he has a cannon, as much as I think he can play, is there really anything there? Like, particularly when you look at the possibility of Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or Daniel Jones, which are kind of just the sloppy seconds, thirds, and even fourths of other teams. At least those guys bring a little bit of upside as options, right? Jacoby Brissett doesn't quite bring that. I mean, Trey Lance, the next one on the list here, that's a guy who stinks, okay? That's a very bad quarterback. There's no mistake, but he's still very, very young. And a lot of the talk around Anthony Richardson when he was drafted, a lot of people were talking about Josh Allen as the upside. And of course, in the NFL draft, we always get so enamored with the upside of a player. Josh Allen was the guy that everyone was looking at for Anthony Richardson. But another name that you could have easily drawn a comparison to is Trey Lance. When you were talking about the downside, right? And as it currently stands, not that Anthony Richardson is as bad as Trey Lance, but if you're saying, has he been closer to Josh Allen or has he been closer to Trey Lance? He has been a little closer to Trey Lance, in my personal opinion. Now, do I like the option of Trey Lance at all? No. In fact, as I'm talking about this, I dare say I would prefer Jacoby Brissett over Trey Lance, actually, even though I have my list in front of me kind of in a different order. But yeah, I mean, that's what you're looking at with Trey Lance. You're looking at a worse version of Anthony Richardson. And not for anything, with the way Anthony Richardson is played, and Lord knows the football gods, please understand that I want Anthony Richardson to be the best quarterback possible for the Indianapolis Colts. I want him to lead this team to Super Bowls. I am rooting for Anthony Richardson like nobody else, okay? But I forget my point. My point is that Trey Lance, even worse than him. Okay? That's my point. Justin Fields also stinks, right? But what did I say? When you look at what's in front of us this offseason, Justin Fields, one of the better options, 25 years old. And I was never really a fan of him coming out of college, which is why I think I'm harsh with a guy like Justin Fields. Because if I don't like you out of college and then you come into the league and don't do anything to prove me wrong, I'm certainly not going to flip sides. Like, I'd be much more inclined if I liked Justin Fields out of college to try to find the glimmers of hope, right? But if I didn't think he was going to cut it to begin with, there's really nothing he has shown in his NFL career so far that disproves anything I felt about him coming in. That being said, 25 years of age, and at least in terms of skill set, which I think is perhaps a little bit overblown as an important thing, as a backup, you would not have to quote unquote change the playbook if you brought in Justin Fields in relief of Anthony Richardson or even started him, right? They have comparable skill sets, meaning you could kind of run the same type of offense with both of them. And of course, as a running quarterback, opens up the read option game, and that quarterback run opens things up for Jonathan Taylor. I think Justin Fields could come in and do reasonably well for the Indianapolis Colts. I think it would be the best structure on offense he's ever had, which would really be the case for Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Daniel Jones, right? They would all probably be in the best structure offensively that they've had. And Justin Fields did okay with the Steelers, at least in terms of wins and losses. That being said, we know how well Mike Tomlin is able to get the best out of shitty quarterback situations. That being said, not that this is a Steelers show, perhaps the Steelers could find a quarterback, but that's neither here nor there. Kind of like the Colts right now in many ways, the Steelers. They're kind of just like top shelf Indianapolis Colts right now, right? Very, very similar in many, many ways. But nonetheless, Justin Fields, I think a reasonable option for the Colts. One I wouldn't get upset about, but I've never really been a fan of him. So I would kind of have to change my tune and be pretty fake, right? If Justin Fields came in, because I would have to talk about the possibility that he's very, very good, a possibility that if we're being honest, I don't really see the real upside in Fields other than the fact that he's 25 years old and has times. Now, Daniel Jones is the one that I love for the Indianapolis Colts. And I'll tell you what, confidence at the quarterback position, so important. And being from New York, the local channels, of course, have on the New York Giants. So I've watched quite a bit of Daniel Jones, and my stance on him has been very, very clear. But to those who know me, obviously not to you, why would I talk about Daniel Jones here? I think that Daniel Jones physically has every single thing you would want as a franchise quarterback. I think he can throw. Like, I think Daniel Jones is a nice natural thrower of the football. And of course, he has wheels, okay? But confidence at that quarterback position is so important. And when your confidence degrades at that position, it's very, very hard to come back, particularly when it's very, very clear or an organization doesn't believe in you. But if you look at his first season under Brian Daboll, and when I say his first season, I mean Brian Daboll's first season with Daniel Jones, right? Very, very impressive stuff out of Daniel Jones. They were 10-6. That was a good team. I watched the Colts verse them that year, okay, in person. The Giants since then have not and did not help Daniel Jones whatsoever. Like, between the poor offensive line play on that team, Saquon Barkley either being injured or obviously them letting him walk in one of the great, unbelievable moments. Like, you want to talk about cinema. Joe Schoen in Hard Knocks talking about Saquon Barkley. I believe, if I'm not mistaken right now, they can't even get another team to do Hard Knocks after that. I mean, it was that bad. But point being, his receiving core also never as talented as what the Colts have right now. This right here, as I said earlier, would be the best offense that Daniel Jones has been a part of. I mean, you talk about Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor, an offensive line that has traditionally performed damn good, and an offensive-minded coach in Shane Steichen. I mean, I predict that Daniel Jones, if he was signed by the Indianapolis Colts, would come in and potentially win that job from Anthony Richardson. Like, I think Daniel Jones much more fit, even if it doesn't seem that way on the surface, to be a starting quarterback going into this season than Anthony Richardson. And if he's not, that's fine too, because we're rooting for Anthony. But Daniel Jones is the type of guy that we want over here, still 27 years old, and not for anything, in my opinion, has everything you want in a franchise quarterback. So for me, the prospect of the Colts signing Daniel Jones, very, very, very exciting. I mean, you look at what Sam Darnold was able to do for the Vikings, and make no mistake, Sam Darnold is exactly who we thought he was, and I certainly don't want the Colts spending money on him, but Daniel Jones is a guy on a cheap contract that could come in and kind of give the Colts something similar to maybe what Sam Darnold was able to bring to the Vikings, albeit without Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Kevin O'Connell, all this stuff, right? But that's kind of how I feel about those free agent quarterbacks that Jeremy Fowler was talking about. Now, let's get into Shane Steichen and his interview on 1075 The Fan, okay? He was asked, and I believe, I don't know if these were related, but he was asked something along the lines of, if you had to take one player on your team to like babysit your kid or something like that, like who could hold down the fort, he picked DeForest Buckner. And then they kind of asked him to expand upon that. And he was talking about DeForest Buckner and how he holds guys accountable. And one of the things that he said that I thought was a very, very, very important tidbit from Shane Steichen was that he said the best teams he's ever been a part of are player led in the locker room, meaning the quote unquote culture that we talk about was player first, led by the players. And that is so, so important because so often the Indianapolis Colts fan base is pointing at guys like Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay as the guys who have deteriorated this culture. And it's not to say that they don't have a part in that. Of course, they have a responsibility, but the league has rules in place where there's only so much that you can do at the facility, meaning that to truly be great, it's what you're doing away from the facility, not so much what you're doing at the facility. At least if you're going to weigh it in terms of like which one has a higher, I don't know, a higher contribution to success. Players need to be putting in extra work. And that is a culture that ultimately the coaches cannot instill. The players have to embrace that, okay? You have 53 guys on a roster that far outnumbers the amount of coaches, GMs, and owners you have on the team, okay? The players need to lead the charge for the Indianapolis Colts moving forward. Because make no mistake, when time comes to negotiate a contract and they're out there making all these tackles and all these catches and running for all these yards and catching all these passes, there ain't a single one of them talking about the coach, okay? And the role that the coach played in them having that success. They're talking about their contributions, okay? So, with that being said, when you take that into account, you have to look at it on the other side and say, well, if you're not getting the job done, it's also on you, okay? Because when you're getting the job done, you're going to take all the credit. So when things aren't going that way, it has to be on you. And this Colts team, year after year after year, when shit goes sideways, okay, when shit hits the fan, too often have we seen players pointing towards the organization in the media. Some people say that's required. The way I look at it is I say, hey, as a player, not for anything, in the middle of the season, I don't need to hear that shit, okay? Forget what the organization is doing to make this the best team possible. What are you doing to make this the best organization it can possibly be? And if the answer is not everything in your power, then I don't want to hear anything about the organization. And I know none of that is what Shane Steichen said, but what he said about players leading the charge in the locker room is so true. For anyone who has maybe played a team sport before, and it's not to say you don't understand football if you've never played a team sport, but from the perspective of accountability and driving each other to be the best you can be, that is something that happens amongst the boys. Like that happens amongst the boys in the locker room. The coach, it's a different deal. There's a separation there. Even if you're super close with the coach, like the only exception to this might be a Dan Campbell, the boys have to hold each other accountable and the boys have to set the standard. And right now, that's what the Colts have struggled with. Now, perhaps that's been in part due to a level of job security they've been provided that ultimately wasn't warranted. But I think that's why you're going to see some of the changes that we see this offseason. Like EJ Speed, I think gone. Julian Blackman, I think gone. Because I think the organization's going to have to send a message to these players that things are getting shaken up. I think we have a lot of good guys in the locker room to lead this thing forward, to be a part of the solution, but they're going to have to recognize that they were part of the problem first. And hopefully that's something that is happening because without these players stepping up, there's nothing that Shane Steichen can do. There's nothing that Chris Ballard can do. And there's nothing that Jim Irsay can do, and nothing that the rest of the coaching staff can do to change the fortunes for this team. Has to start with the boys in the locker room. And I want to make sure as fans, we understand that perfectly clear. Do not let these players gaslight you and make it like it's not on them. It is on them. And when things are going well, they're going to make sure you know that they deserve credit for it. Okay? Okay. Now, Tyler Warren. Final topic before we are done. Let me take a little sip of water real quick. Okay. So, just about every single mock draft on planet Earth right now has Tyler Warren going to the Colts at number 14 overall. The question is that the right idea for the Indianapolis Colts? And I'll tell you where I stand. Okay, personally, I have never been the biggest fan of drafting tight ends in the first round. Now, that doesn't mean you're inherently wrong to do it, okay? If you feel the best player on the board is a tight end and you feel like you need one, you go ahead and you draft that tight end. I'm not going to sit here if the Colts draft a tight end and say, oh, I don't like tight ends in the first round, so I'll dismiss the pick. That's not how I'm going to approach it. I understand that there are times when drafting the tight end in the first round is the right move. But ultimately, historically, it has been very, very tough to trust tight ends as rookies to come in and be contributing factors. I mean, if you start going through some of the tight ends that have been drafted in this league since the year 2000, I mean, Kyle Pitts, what was everyone saying about him out of the draft? He's been absolutely terrible in the NFL, at least when you talk about what was expected of him, right? Coming in, he was considered a generational talent. Not the case, okay? Noah Fant, that was a first-round pick. Sure, he's a serviceable tight end, but that's about where it ends. Is that really an impact player? TJ Hawkinson, one of the better tight ends in football as it currently stands, but that didn't happen immediately. TJ Hawkinson was considered, again, a revolutionary or a generational talent is the word I was looking for at the tight end position, okay? He took a little bit to come into his own. Hayden Hurst, come on. David Njoku, only recently has he become an impact player, okay? Evan Ingram took a long time to come into his own. O.J. Howard, generational talent. I mean, it was really terrible. Is he even on a team right now, O.J. Howard? I have no clue. Tyler Eifert, big-time tight end. Didn't really make all that big of an impact. Was pretty good, but that's about where it ended. Jermaine Gresham, generational talent, right? Pettigrew, Dustin Keller, Mercedes Lewis, et cetera, et cetera. My point being is that there are a lot of guys, and then you could flip it the other way too, right? Like you have the Dallas Clarks of the world, of course, that we would know very, very well. You have the Jeremy Shockeys. You have the Greg Olsons, okay? You have the Brock Bowers. Great first-round tight ends absolutely exist, but you are, to some degree, when expecting them to make an immediate impact, fighting really the history of the position in the NFL. So it's just something to keep in mind as we think about this offseason. We know the work that we need to do in the secondary, and I know some people are going to say you have to draft Tyler Warren. For me personally, I have no problem with a Malachi Starks if he's available. Corner, I wouldn't mind. The Colts and Chris Ballard haven't done a particularly good job drafting the position, but at the same time, you bring in Luan Arumo, you bring in the guy from the Ravens, and those are two guys who are specialists in the secondary. Maybe they can help a little bit scouting in that department. But I mean, Tyler Warren destined to be drafted to the Indianapolis Colts. Right now, I think it feels that way, but the NFL, just when you think it's going to zig, it zags. Like it has a very, very funny way of reminding us that we don't know quite as much as we think we know. But if right now you're on the pick Tyler Warren train, I do want to make one thing clear. You don't get to turn around and trash the pick after on if he doesn't live up to the hype, okay? Like you don't get to be vehemently, you don't get to be foaming at the mouth over a take that you have, but then not bear the responsibility of that take. So if you like Tyler Warren now and you want the Colts to draft him, if he doesn't live up, of course you can acknowledge that, but what you don't get to do is turn the gun on the organization and make it like you didn't like the idea too, at least if we're talking about having a fair discussion about the team. But with that being said, I think that's going to wrap up what we're doing for today. That's a little bit of a weekly roundup. That's the show. You made it to the end. Congratulations. My name is Justin. This right here was the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, like, subscribe, all that shit if you haven't done it yet. And as always, go Colts.